Okay, let me see if I can do this. I want to take on the Supreme Court. It's been a long time since I did one of these videos. I like doing them, but I often don't have time to prepare these things and then get them done. But let me just do this. There was an article by one of these legal writers. I don't want to get into names, citing some lawyers who were troubled about a proposal in the House of Representatives, I believe, to amend the Constitution to have the Supreme Court to create divisions of the Supreme Court in 6 different geopolitical zones, I guess including Abuja. Doesn't really matter whether they want to do that, whether how they want to do it, whether to create 6 or 7 or they want to add one more. But the important point is that they want to create, they want to decentralize the Supreme Court. My name is Chukwuma Odelugo. I'm a lawyer. Let me just try this and see if it works. If you like it, I do more. If you don't like it, I'm really very busy. But anyway, let me do this. One of the fundamental things, for years, I've been preaching about Nigeria. Joined many groups, WhatsApp groups. I've left them because Anakonena. Look, the main problem Nigeria has is its structure. And until Nigeria gets its structure right, Nigeria will not make any progress. But I will tell you, but what happens is that every time Nigeria gets an opportunity to change its structure, or anytime somebody thinks of changing the structure of Nigeria or changing its governance structure in one way or another, they make a mistake. They make a mistake that does what? Compounds the original problem. This is how the states came to be. Nigeria was divided in regions. In preparation for the war, 12 states were created. Then from 12 states, okay, forget about the 12 states, then we went to 19. Then from 19 we went to whatever, and now we are 36. But each time, rather than shrinking, collapsing the states, they're going the other way, increasing the number of states. That's the same problem that the Supreme Court is having. In fact, not just the Supreme Court, but the entire court system. So let me just stay on the topic. The idea of decentralizing the Supreme Court is extremely bad. In fact, it's the worst thing anyone can do. In fact, it's actually astonishing that anyone would even think about it when you consider the word supreme. You see, the word supreme implies, the word supreme implies one. Is the supreme being. There are no 2 supreme beings. There can only be 1 supreme being. Supreme is the top. And on top, there can only be 1. So now you want to create divisions of supreme. Now, isn't that an oxymoron? How does that work? Now, when you create these divisions, it means you have to now do what? Appoint more justices to sit in all these divisions. Now, the second problem that Nigeria has is that the Supreme Court has is that it sits in panels. The Supreme Court should not sit in panels. It's the Supreme Court. Its word should be one. Again, sitting in panels is like sitting in numerous places at the same time. There is no way 5 or 7 justices, any combination of 5 or 7 justices will give you almost nearly exactly the same opinion. 2 or 3 lawyers can barely agree on anything. if they disagree on the principles of law, or if they agree on principles of law, they'll disagree on style, wording. Where may use may, another lawyer may use might. At the end of the day, you get several interpretations that shouldn't be. But if you look at the U.S. Supreme Court, it sits as one. One, and all 9 justices sit on the same case. And then one justice is picked to write the opinion of the court. Everything that justice writes is everybody's word. And it's clear. Now, the problem, the reason why this person wanted to, or is trying to introduce decentralization of the court is because of the numerous numbers of cases at the Supreme Court. They feel like if there are more divisions, then the Supreme Court will be closer. The Southeast will have its own division, and then the reason why the Supreme Court has too many cases isn't because the Supreme Court is too small. It's because the Supreme Court has this section 233 of the Constitution that gives the Supreme Court, that provides for appeals as of right to the Supreme Court. If you get nothing from this video, get this. In the Nigerian Supreme Court, there are appeals as of right. Let me explain. That means you can literally take a case from a magistrate court and go to the High Court, go to the Court of Appeal, and end up at the Supreme Court. That is, you get 3 levels of appeal in a single case. No jurisdiction with any kind of common sense does that. No Supreme Court. Even in the US, the states have their own Supreme Court. They don't even hear cases as of right. Then you don't have all appeals to almost, in fact, all Supreme Courts that I know, both of the states and the US Supreme Court are by certiorari, otherwise called by leave. That is, if you're dissatisfied with what the appellate court did, you will now apply to the Supreme Court and ask the Supreme Court, will you hear this additional appeal? The Supreme Court will look at it and they'll come back in 99.9% of the time and say, no, we're not going to hear it. That means your right just ended at the appellate court, at the intermediate appellate court, which is just fine. This is not heaven. There's no perfect justice. We're human beings. What you're trying to give to the citizens is access to the courts, access to justice. You're not trying to give perfect justice. That is impossible and unattainable, and it isn't the function of government. So, rather than Nigeria, so now, for instance, if you finish your case, typically at the High Court, it goes to the Court of Appeal, overseeing the division of your High Court. If you're dissatisfied, what happens? You go to the Supreme Court in Abuja. Now that means that every case, literally every case in Nigeria has the potential of ending up at the Supreme Court of the Federation. Now, the more the population increases, the more lawyers we have, the more cases thrown out, the more cases end up at the Supreme Court. You end up with an overwhelmed Supreme Court. And in many cases, the issues are the same. In many cases, the Court of Appeal have already done their best. I mean, one magistrate has looked at it, or even if a magistrate looked at it, a high court judge looked at it. After a high court judge looked at it, justices of the Court of Appeal looked at it, 3 justices. Now you need. Now, and then when you get there, they set up a panel of usually 5, and in some cases 7. And what do? This panel of 5 will give one ruling. Tomorrow, next week, perhaps another panel is sitting on substantially the same issue. They may end up giving a different ruling, a different interpretation, a different reading of the law, a different outcome on similar facts or similar law than the one that just came down, because it's a different panel. And guess what? You need someone at the top to resolve those conflicts, or you throw the jurisprudence of the country in chaos. And that's what the problem is. But one of the functions of the Supreme Court is supposed to be reconciling. In the US, they call it reconciling the circuits, because the courts of appeal are called the circuit courts of appeal in the US. But here they're called the Court of Appeal. The Courts of Appeal. One of the primary functions of the Supreme Court is reconciling the position of the circuits. That is, the Lagos division rules one way, the Ibadan division rules a different way, the Enugu division rules a different way. And the Supreme Court now brings the 3 rulings together and says, we like this one better. This one should apply throughout the country. But when you have panels, you don't achieve that. There's no one to reconcile different panels. So it's a state of confusion. But I'll tell you, what often happens in Nigeria is when they decide to solve this problem, they will go out there and they'll pick people in Nigeria, lawyers in Nigeria, who have no idea what should be done. And they'll commission them, and they'll go out and they do what they normally do. They tinker at the edges, and they almost always do what? Come back having compounded the problem. And Nigeria continues to be what they normally do. The way they describe Nigeria, a chaotic country. Let me just sum this up. I didn't prepare this video. I just thought, let me just do this. Maybe I'll post it, maybe I won't. But the reason why the Supreme Court is overwhelmed is that all appeals can potentially end up there. Appeals as of right. There should be no appeals as of right to the Supreme Court. Now, there's another problem that the court system has. It's the incomplete state court system. The incomplete state court system because of, again, bad federal structure. I will do that in another video, God willing. Then my name is Chukwuma Odelugo. I hope you like it. Thank you.